going to make a Photoshop Rorschach Inkblot. And you're like, what's a Rorschach? Well, if you look up Rorschach on Google, you'll probably see some images from the comic Watchmen. You might have seen the movie of the character Rorschach. And this guy was actually, his face changed like a Rorschach Inkblot, constantly changing. And if we scroll down, we'll actually see the psychologist who came up with the Rorschach Inkblot. He would just drip some ink on a piece of paper, fold it in half, open it back up, and then he would show his patients these ink blots. And even though they're abstract, he would show them to his patients and say, "What do you see? Do you see darkness? I see a pretty butterfly. I see a bat." You could kind of start these conversations and kind of inform yourself about the person by what they see from the ink blot. So before we open up Photoshop, I wanted to talk about some choices that you get to make. So you could use abstract brushes, and what I mean by abstract is that it's non-representational. I can't see anything from the real world from this, okay? So this is really just ink on paper that's been folded in half. Now, a psychologist could say, "What do you see?" And you could say, "I think I see a lady in the middle with feet, or I see a butterfly, or I see a bird." And you don't really see that. It's just like, your perception of what that could represent. Now, if I go over to these left ones and I look at these ink blots and I look closer at them, wait a second, that's a hand holding the wrist of somebody. Oh, that's a face, and that's a man over there. And all of these actually have themes. So representational, as I see, that's a hand, that's a person, that's a face. Okay, I can put words to all these things, and that means it's representational things I can identify from the real world. And this one has this overall concept of violence. On the left here, again, representational. I can look at it and say, oh, floral and twigs and a hand. And so there's these aspects from nature coming through here. And this would be another example of representational. So you might want to think about like theme, like what is the overall message before you actually make your Photoshop Inkblot. So I'm going to go to Photoshop now, and I'm going to say File, New. And at the top here, I'm going to hit print, and I'm going to pick tabloid. And before I hit create, I want to actually pick landscape, not portrait, so that it's 17 by 11, it's 300, and I'm going to hit create. Okay, before I get started, I'm going to go to my layers palette and create a new layer, and that's just in case maybe I want to erase or delete while I'm working, or work in layers. It's totally up to you. And on the left here, I'm going to select my brush tool, and when you see that, you're going to see this little butterfly icon. So I'm going to select that and hit vertical, and when you do that, it's going to create a line in the center, which means I'm creating this axis, and you can either hit enter return or the check mark. And once you do that, anything you make on the left side, it's going to make a mirror reflection on the right side. And it does it totally for you. So cool. All right. So now I have my brush tool selected, and you get to pick color. So I'm going to work with black. You could also work with white as like a negative. Like after you kind of layer black, you can come back with white brushes, and that's something to think of. Or you could do kind of like your own color. It's totally up to you. So I'm picking black. I'm going to my brush tool. I'm going to this brush window, and I'm going to go to the gear. Now I see the tips of my brushes, and you can see I already imported a lot. I'm going to go to the gear, and if you pick brush name or brush stroke, yours might look like this. So I'm just going to the gear and unchecking that. So I just highly recommend that you say tip, so that you can just see a little icon of the brush that you're picking while you're moving. You also see this is how you can control the size of your brush, but I'll also show you a little shortcut to that. And this is how you can rotate the brush. All right, so I'm going to go to the gear, and if you say get more brushes, you can go online and download tons of brushes. Some of them are free, some of them cost places. You can also go to Google Chrome and go to VectEasy and all these different Brush Easy and all these different places that you can find free brushes. So if you have an idea in mind, there is tons out there. I'm going to go to import brushes. And I'm going to go to our server. Now you have to connect to the server. So right here I don't see my server. So you have to double click the globe icon to connect. No, it's not connecting. Cool. It's not connecting, guys. All right, so that's what you're going to do. and I'm sure it will connect for you. Once you do that, I'm gonna go. So let's pretend that I'm gonna go to the desktop and pretend that this is the digital server. You're gonna find a folder called Stock, and inside there you're gonna find one that says Photoshop Resources, and then inside there you're gonna see Photoshop Brushes, and in there you're gonna see folders and folders and folders and folders. You're gonna look for a file that says .abr, and then that will, when you select that and hit open, then it will import it at the very bottom here. Sorry that it didn't work for you guys. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start with like the moons. So I'm going to select one of the moons and I'm going to get out of my, I hit escape to get out of the menu, and I'm going to use the right curly bracket to make it bigger, and you can use the left curly bracket to make it smaller. So I'm going to make it pretty big and click just once. I'm just clicking once, and there you go. Now if I click and drag, notice that it's kind of like, you can paint with it, but I don't really like it. So I'm going to hit Command Z to undo that. And I'm just going to play around with the moons. And again, left escape to get out of here. Left curly bracket to make, oh, I wanted to pick a bigger one. Oh, there you go. And left curly bracket to make it smaller. Interesting. And what I mean by layering is maybe I come back here and I change it to white. And I'm going to make it smaller again. And if I click with white, notice that we're getting like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's like deleting. It's like, you know, erasing it. It's really cool. So usually with the Rorschach Inkblots, you're going to keep kind of like everything in the middle. And then usually there's a lot of white negative space over here. So I would continue to build with this. I would do a lot more. You can make more than one if you want. When you're done, you're going to say File, Save As. And I highly recommend you select Photoshop and do a Photoshop one just in case you want to open it again and kind of play around with it again. And I'm going to say Inkblot and then today's date. And I'm going to save that to my desktop folder, my photo folder, and say Save. Okay, and then I'm also going to file save and I'm going to pick JPEG. And that's the one that you're going to end up uploading. I'm going to hit save. Yes, replace. And that's the one you're going to upload to Canvas. But notice that when I'm in my Photoshop.psd version, I can play around here and open it up and continue to play with layers. Maybe I actually want to pick white and actually, you know, erase part of it and start, you know, over again. So you can continue to manipulate it and you can do that. Okay? All right.